Hello, good evening to some of you, good morning and good afternoon to the others. My name is Mariana Albuquerque. It is a pleasure to be here today moderating this panel of the Day of the Climate Professional. First of all, I would like to talk about what is the Day of the Climate Professional and YCL, Youth Climate Leaders, the organization that is hosting and organizing the events. The Day of the Climate Professional, as you all know, is a virtual summit of 24 hours of ongoing activities. And now, this panel specifically is going to talk about the role of the international organizations as a path for building a climate career. So we have here today three representatives from climate professionals at international organizations. And it's going to be a huge pleasure to learn from them how they can engage in collective answers and collective challenges for tackling the climate crisis. Just to summarize, who am I and why I was invited to be the moderator of this panel? My name is Mariana Albuquerque. I work now as a project coordinator at the Brazilian Climate Center, a Brazilian think tank that partners with international organizations to implement national projects here in Brazil. We now collaborate with the United Nations Environment Programme, also with the European Union, Climate Reality Projects, and also some national-based organizations as the Climate and Society Institute here in Brazil. But before, my career was based on international relations, an academic career. I did my BA, my master's, and my PhD on international politics, specifically on the United Nations organization. And during my PhD research, I had the opportunity to work with the delegation, the Brazilian delegation at the United Nations, right after the approval of the Paris Agreements. So it was a huge momentum, an important momentum, to see what collective action can do for climate. If we are talking about a transnational challenge, we need to think about a collective answer. And that's why international organizations are so relevant for understanding how we, as an international society and as an international community, can tackle the climate emergency that we now face. So just some topics about the work of the Brazilian Climate Center. It is not an international organization as the other participants from today, but it is an organization that partners with international organizations to build the climate agenda here in Brazil. We are now mainly working with the subnational level. So the Brazilian Climate Center is the organization that facilitates and hosts and convenes the international initiative of the Governors for the Climate here in Brazil, an alliance of governors that are committed to the climate agenda. And also we work with the state councils for climate change, that it is an important instrument for subnational governance here in our country. So it is an honor and a pleasure to receive here today Raul Salazar from the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, Bruna Jimba from the UN Habitat, and Carlo Pereira from the UN Global Compact. So our three guests today are going to talk about how they work at these organizations, what are the main skills required for you, young professionals who wants to build a career in the climate sector, and how we can think about international organizations as a path to overcome our current climate crisis. So today I'm just the moderator. I want them to shine. So I will pass the floor to our first speakers today, who will be Raul Salazar from the United Nations Office for Disaster and Risk Reduction. Mr. Salazar is the current chief of the United Nations Office for Disaster and Risk Reduction, Regional Office for the Americas, supporting in policy advice for integration of disaster risk reduction considerations and sustainable development. So Raul, thanks for joining us tonight. It is a pleasure to meet you, and I'm eager to learn from you and to hear your perspectives. So my first question to you is a broad question. I would like to ask you to briefly present the work of your organization And what are the main initiatives that UNDRR has on climate change? Raul, thank you, and the floor is yours. Your mic is muted.
Thank you, Mariana. It's a pleasure to be here with you, joining this conversation and to bring you some of the ideas that are behind our work in disaster risk reduction, and why it's so important to link the work of organization with the climate change effort. Basically, the organization that I'm part of and I lead in the regional context of the Americas and the Caribbean is an organization that has as its base supporting countries in what we call implementing a global framework that is called the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. There is a framework that was adopted in 2015 by 184 countries that basically agreed on the importance of taking measures to reduce the impact of disasters, because disasters have an immediate impact in the aspirations of development of the different countries. We have seen time and time again that disasters impact in our societies, impact in our region, and pulls back the efforts of development could be 10 years back in time. We have seen this happening in extreme cases of Haiti, when in 2010, the earthquake just wiped out completely all the efforts that had been implemented in the country in terms of setting the path for at least certain levels of improvement in the living conditions. But even though they were very low, the impact was immense in terms of what had been achieved. We have seen also how in our region, not only the disasters have a strong impact in the losses of lives, but also in the economic impact of disasters. And we have some estimations that we have done recently in terms of how much disasters have impacted our region. And the Americas and the Caribbean is basically the last 20 years has absorbed nearly 44% of all the economic losses that has happened around the world. This is not in proportion to what the population is in the Americas and the Caribbean. It is not in proportion to the extension of the territory of the Americas and the Caribbean. We are just 1/10 of the population of Asia Pacific. However, we are absorbing more, or nearly 50% of all those losses. That means that what we are doing now is something that we need to reflect on. And then the process of leading countries on that reflection, on identifying what we have done wrong and what we can do better, is basically the role of our office. And this is what we do in the region. We accompany the countries in this reflection. And the connection with climate change is very clear. Of all these 50% of the economic losses that we have faced, all these, nearly 90% of all these losses are due to climate disaster origins. So basically, these are disasters that are related to climate, either hurricanes, either floods due to intense rains, not necessarily due to earthquakes that happen in the region, volcanoes, all the geological aspects of these disasters. So this is also then one of the reasons why linking the agenda of disaster reduction, linking the agenda of the Sendai framework with the climate agenda agreed in Paris is so important. And in that sense, what we have done is initiate what the countries call for the UN when they agreed those global frameworks, when the international community and countries adopted the Sustainable Development Goals, the climate agenda, the Sendai framework, the habitat agenda. In this case, they asked for the UN and all the international organizations working on this to work on what they call coherence. Do not overburden countries with one framework on top of the other, with requests from one framework in one side and the other side pulling all those efforts in the reporting or preparing responses or results for other frameworks, but rather work together. And this is what we have done with the climate change agenda. To give you an example, one of the targets of the Sendai framework is what we call the countries have committed towards 2020 by the end of the year to advance in the preparation of national strategies for disaster risk reduction, national and local disaster strategies for disaster reduction, which is an initial part of identifying what has happened in the past, what are our weaknesses, and then plan what we can do better. So the community has asked to link those plans with the national adaptation plans that are called for example, the climate change agenda. So both mechanisms are now working together, and in that sense, not only help countries to work in one single plan, but also join forces and resources towards one single effort. Those things are common. I mean, disasters, as I told you, are 9 out of the 10 disasters that have happened in the region. So that's why disasters are so important in the reflection of the role of our office. So I just would like, if you allow me, to give you a very brief idea of what we do towards a very short video that I would like to share with you on the work of the office. Just give me 1 second and I'll connect. Can you see my screen? Good. There I go.
You've seen me in the news. I cost you hundreds of billions of dollars each year. I destroy lives. Sometimes forever. By now, you probably met me in person. Do I have your attention? So far, you have defended yourself, responded, tried to rebuild what I destroyed. You recovered, and eventually, you forgot. Disaster. Respond. Recover. Repeat. Disaster.
Disaster.
Respond.
Respond.
Recover.
Recover.
Repeat.
Repeat. We have to break this vicious cycle. Recover better. Reduce risk. Build resilience. Focus on prevention. Prevention saves lives.
Thank you for your time. This is what we want to do. This is the role of our office. We need to break the sales cycle. We need to do it with your help. You young generations, the ones that are going to take the leads in the incoming years, this is your task. We are here to help. Thank you very much.
Raul, thank you so much for your inspiring remarks. I think the main message that we should take forward is that to talk about climate change, we have to bring a holistic approach. Climate change is not only an environmental issue, it is also an infrastructure, energy, social, health. So thank you so much for showing us what your organization does and what is your main line of work. I think you're gonna receive a lot of curriculums from the next days, because people want to work for this effort. The United Nations as a whole is the main collective response that we have had so far in the history of humankind. So it is amazing to see that inside the United Nations, we have a lot of complementary efforts and complementary initiatives to work on the climate agenda. So thank you so much for your first round of remarks. We're gonna be back to you really soon. But now I would like to invite to the panel Bruna Jimba from the UN Habitat. Bruna works as a program assistant at the Regional Office for Latin America and the Caribbean at the United Nations Human Settlements Program, UN Habitat, supporting the implementations of projects with a focus on the role of cities in sustainable development. So first of all, Bruna, good evening. It's really nice to have you here. And I would like to, as I did with Raul, give you first an open question that you can give us a little bit of context about the UN Habitat's work and about your background on international relations and how did you succeeded in working at an international organizations. So the question would be, Bruna, if you could give us an overview of the UN Habitat's work on climate change, and tell us a little bit about your trajectory until landing a job in the United Nations. Thank you, Bruna, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mariana. It's an awesome opportunity to be here today. I'm very happy to be sharing this evening with you and the day of the climate professional as well. And I'll start giving just an overview of my trajectory so you can understand where I'm speaking from. I'm graduated in international relations from the Federal University of Rio, and I started my career in the Danish consulate here in Rio. And this was the first time I got to be in contact with sustainability policies and agenda in general. Then when I was working at the Brazilian embassy with a more of a trade approach, I could also continue this involvement with climate action because of Denmark's high commitment to this global agenda. And after that, while I was in the exchange program in the University of Copenhagen, I started to focus a little bit more on global urban issues in general, and to look at international development with more of a focus on cities. And with this in mind, I started to be involved with events and initiatives that gathers international cooperation and sustainable urban development. And I started a volunteer vacancy in UN Habitat here in Rio. Then it developed to be an internship, a junior vacancy, and now as a program assistant. So this is briefly my trajectory in the international field. And what I think I could really contribute here today, as how brought the correlation between disaster risk management and the holistic approaches that is important to take into account while looking at climate change. I think that another dimension that is really important and sometimes overlooked is the correlation with between cities and climate change. And it's interesting to see that cities are at the core of climate change adaptation and mitigation. And that is because of many different reasons. First, it's a kind of obvious, but we don't always think about it. But since 2007, we live in an urban world, and the rapid urbanization process is developing progressively. So the way we look at development needs to consider urban planning in all levels. And also because of that, urban footprint is very, very impressive. We have I brought some data here to illustrate. Cities are responsible for more than 70% of carbon dioxide emissions, and they are also the larger ones consume 2/3 of the world's energy. And also, not only the urban footprint, but also cities are the most impacted. So more than 70% of cities in the world are already dealing with climate change impacts. And of course, they are not dealing with it in the same way, so they are impacted differently. Not only cities in developing world are dealing with it differently, but also populations within cities. So we now know that urban poor and minorities are, of course, the most impacted, with a focus on gender as well. There's a big gender dimension on this impact. But cities, they're not only being impacted and causing most of the climate change issues, but they are also solution hubs. So because they are the most impacted, they are also hubs for solutions, for opportunities to look at a different way of developing an urban future and a global future. So this is the main thing I want to stress today. Looking at that urban innovation and action are at the center of this climate change response, and be it in the level of adaptation, but mitigation as well. So when we look at the global agenda, sometimes we focus climate change on SDG 13, but SDG 11 is also a very important SDG to take into account when looking at it, as SDG 11 is correlated with all other SDGs, and especially due to being to most of the population living in cities. And talking a little bit more about UN Habitat approach to climate change and how do we work with it. It is one of the main domains of change of our planning for future implementation project implementations, and we focus on the response, considering the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, but also resource efficiency and the adaptation of communities. But as Mariana and also Raul mentioned, always with an holistic approach, not only responding and adapting to shocks and stresses, but also looking at resilience, urban resilience as a new way to look to sustainable development. So we mainly work in two different paths. In the operational dimension, we work implementing on-the-ground projects, adaptation projects, more related to infrastructure. But a big action that we have in international agenda is more related to technical knowledge, developing tools, guidelines, and advising local governments and national governments in building their city plans. And what we try to emphasize is the importance of looking at the urban dimension while developing national adaptation plans, but also local plans. And maybe something that is more kind of an innovation from UN Habitat would be the approach with a more of a participatory approach that takes into account a community-based adaptation, but also looking at a citywide planning, not only the local community adaptation, but also the citywide planning, and also connecting with national adaptation and global efforts towards sustainable development. And just to finalize what I was saying, I would like to stress some initiatives UN Habitat has. We have a global urban resilience hub. It's a platform, knowledge platform, where we collect best practices, innovation, capacity building. I can share with you the links afterwards. We also have with UNDRR and other international organizations the campaign an initiative called Making Cities Resilient 2013. And 2 other programs I would like to stress, if I have more time later, I could develop more on that, are the City Resilience Profiling Tool, which is a diagnosis to orient city plans, and Urban Labs, which is a project developed in cooperation with eClay that focus on low emissions development strategies. So this is kind of a general overview, and I would just like to conclude re-emphasizing the importance of cities in the climate change response, and that the main thing we always try to repeat in UN Habitat is that it has to be an approach that focus on the most affected, the most vulnerable populations. So it is to leave no one and also no place behind. So that's it. Thank you, Mariana.
Bruna, thank you so much. And as I said to Raul, you at the UN Habitat may expect a few candidates for for a vacancy in the upcoming days, because it is such an inspired work that I want to work for all of you as well. But I would like just to, before passing the floor to our third guest today, I would like just to give some information about what you said. What are the main ways that people can accede to a job at the United Nations system as a whole? And you talked about that you started volunteering for the organization, and volunteering is one of the main ways to enter the United Nations system. The program that I participated in 2016, it was also a voluntary program. It was not for the UN, it was for the Brazilian delegation at the UN. But when we talk about voluntary working, we are talking about the non-paid jobs, which is something that reinforces inequalities and that are an aspect to be considered and to be evaluated. Some of the panels for this Day of the Climate Professional are addressing inequalities when we talk about the climate change idea. So this is one of the things we have to think, how we can make international organizations also more open access and democratic, so it can reflect the diversity of our population and not make it continuing elite organization and a oligarchy organization, as we struggle so much to not make it happen again. But volunteering work is not the only way you can access the United Nations system. I would like to talk about 2 initiatives. One is the YPP program, the Young Professional Program. Is an open access work at the UN. You can fill up a form with your personal data and your line of expertise. And it is a selection process, like a cooperative selection process. You have an interview, you have an exam, you have to prove your English or other foreign language proficiencies. But I would suggest for anyone who wants to start a climate career at the United Nations to check what are the main requisites and what are the main criteria for applying to the Young Professional Program, because it is paid and it is a good pay, and you have an opportunity to build a career inside the Young Professional Programs. And also, I would like to suggest to all of you to check the Inspira platform. It is a platform that congregates all the vacancies for all the UN agencies, funds, and organizations. So if you check at this platform, you may find some vacancies for UN Habitat or for UNDRR or for other UN system organizations. So I would like to add these 2 comments, and thank you, Bruna, again for your introductory remarks. I see you soon. And now I would like to invite our third panelist, Carlo Pereira. Carlo, good night. It's a pleasure to have you here. Carlo has more than 20 years of experience in corporate affairs and sustainability issues, acting as an executive for the private sector and international institutions. He works at the UN Global Compact, the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative. So, Carlo, thank you for joining us tonight. And the first question I would like to address to you is that most people think of governments when they hear about international organizations in climate change. Can you tell us a little bit more about the work of the UN Global Compact and the role of businesses and private corporations in the issues we are discussing here today? Thank you, Carlo.
Mariana, thank you. Thank you for having me. And yeah, you are right. The UN Global Compact is a strange body, I would say. And we don't work, we do work with governments as well, but our mandate is to work with the private sector. So our approach, it's not around subjects or themes, but sector. So the second sector, companies. And what we try to do there is to push companies to work with sustainable development. And we were born with 90 principles, and then in 25, we internalized the 10th principle. It is around anti-corruption. And now those 10 principles are divided into environment, human rights, and decent work. And then, of course, the anti-corruption one. And as you said, we are the largest corporate sustainability institution in the world. We have more than 15,000 members. We have around 70 local networks. We operate in around 160 countries. And the Brazilian local network, I'm the executive director here in Brazil. And our local network in Brazil is the third largest in the world. We have around 1,100 institutions. And I said institutions and not only companies because, as I said, we are focused on companies, but on the private sector. But actually, we have in our network in the countries, and we operate in that way here in Brazil. We have not only companies, but you have also governments, state levels, city levels, and also ministries, for example. And we do have also NGOs, international and local ones. And what we're doing there is we're discussing the private sector, we're discussing collective actions, projects, initiatives around many different subjects, but to be deployed by the private sector. So that's why we have those different actors, but all of them working on the private sector. And on climate, we have globally an initiative called Caring for Climate. And it is a joint initiative with UNEP and also UNFCCC. And in that initiative, we try to push companies to commit themselves with setting a target for climate emission, GHG emission, based on this science-based. And also we have, of course, we try to help them to adapt themselves for the climate issues, and also we work with them with advocacy. So what you try to do there is, for example, here in Brazil, we help companies to talk to the government to try, for example, to put a price on carbon. So it could be as you know, a tax, and also a carbon market, for example. And what's new in this, for example, to set a target, a science-based target, we have the initiative called 1.5 degrees Celsius. It is a joint initiative with many institutions, and we have now more than 1,000 companies that committed themselves to set a target based on science. And it's very important, of course. As you know, the largest emitters are companies, not countries. It is different here in Brazil, for example. We're talking about the main emitters. It is usually based on energy and transportation. And of course, then it's based on the main source is the private sector. So that's why it's so important. Only to give you an idea, a very, very different figure, I think, is, for example, when you compare GDP with income from companies, so I'm putting the same basket companies in countries. When you list the largest 200, 153 are companies, only 47 are countries. So then we can see how powerful companies are, and not only with their direct impact from their operations, but also, of course, through the influence they have into the governments. So that's why it's very important to engage companies. And in Brazil, then we have a similar approach. We have those similar projects, similar work streams. So on adaptation, on mitigation, and also carbon pricing. And we have here many different projects. We have, for example, a GII, Global Impact Initiative. It is based in this 1.5 degrees Celsius initiative. It is not only to push company to set a target, but also to help them to do so, because it is not so easy. And then we have within a 1 year long journey to help them from a very beginner stage, so to say, to a public commitment. I think for the moment is it.
Carlo, thank you so much for your remarks. And I think you brought some good perspectives about the importance of building a multi-stakeholder climate agenda. We cannot rely only on governments, because governments are not the only emitters. And we cannot give the burden only to the private sector as well, because the legislation and the regulation, it comes from the government. So it is important to build a cross-cutting approach that could integrate and bring together all these sectors and all these efforts, alongside with the scientific knowledge of the academia and also the local perspective from the civil society. So I think that we have like 4 pillars from this climate agenda: governments from one side, the public sector, corporations and the private sector on the other side, the scientific community, and also civil society and non-governmental organizations. So if these 4 pillars, they have to be fully committed, and they have to be working in parallelism to assure that we have a good result. If one sector is eager to do more than the other, then we have an imbalance, and this imbalance, it gives the burden to the other sector who's trying to advance. So it is amazing to see how the Global Compact is working here in Brazil to avoid these kind of clashes and these kind of imbalances in a period where we are globally facing a turmoil, where the climate agenda is on the center stage of all of it. So thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for your work, because it's not only talking about the work, it's working in practice, and you 3 are examples, inspiring examples for our young professionals about how you can build a climate career that will make a difference. So thank you so much for your comments. And I would like to ask Bruna and Raul to join us for the second round of questions. Thank you. I have some questions to address to you today, but now we can interact informally. If someone has a comment to add to the other participants, please feel free to jump in. And just to keep the order for the first round, I would like to direct the first question to Raul. And Raul, this second question is related to the role of local governments in reducing climate impacts. What is the role of the local governments? You talked about risk reduction and how it affects local populations. And also, if you have any hints about which professions or skills are most needed for this local government's effort in tackling the climate change agenda. You're muted, Raul. Your microphone.
One of the key areas that we see in terms of the action on disaster risk reduction is basically how we can get close to the population, the decisions that are needed to reduce disaster risks. And in this sense, local governments are the key to reduce climate impacts. That's very clear. And because they are in a unique position to tackle the cause and effects of climate change. They are closer to the action. They can provide effective leadership for their citizens to catalyze and support the population in the change of behavior that is necessary sometimes at the community level for building a more resilient community. And at the local level, our organization, UNDRR, has had initiatives in relation to what Bruna mentioned before on what is called an initiative called My City is Getting Ready, that is taking the Sendai framework commitments for disaster reduction to the local level, bringing different tools, trainings at the different cities that exist in the region and that are committing or want to commit to achieving resilience. And actually, it's important to mention that in the case of Brazil, the Millennium My City is Getting Ready campaign is attracted the attention of nearly more than 1,000 cities of Brazil that became part of the campaign. Basically, when the campaign was launched, was an advocacy campaign trying to generate some enthusiasm at the local level to see at least that aspiration of becoming resilient, and we provided some tools. But the campaign has given another step beyond actually advocacy to pass to a more to a phase that we call implementation phase, and it has been established a second phase of the Making Cities Resilient campaign towards 2030 that gives continuity to these achievements. In this case, the idea is first, it is not now a UNDRR that promotes a campaign. Rather, this campaign is going to be an alliance or a partnership of different partnerships, a network of networks working together for supporting cities in becoming resilient. And in this case, the campaign basically is going to provide mechanisms to which the cities can articulate their work. They can exchange or provide different support among the different cities, provide this support for policy advice and sharing knowledge and experiences among the different partners. This is basically a co-creation of strategic partners that wants to boost resilience at the local level. And it's basically, the campaign is going to support 3 strategic objectives. First one is to improve cities' understanding of risk. The second is to strengthen the city's capacity to develop local and strategic plans. Remember that what I mentioned before of the target of the Sendai framework of supporting countries, or a target of towards 2020 of supporting national and local governments to develop disaster reduction plans. So this second pillar of this phase of the Resilient Cities campaign aims to that process too. And third, support cities to implement the local strategies, not only to identify and prepare the strategies, but also accompany the process of implementation through the more than 20 different partners and organizations that are working in this and have been working in supporting cities towards this objective. Going to your question, what is expected and what type of opportunities this, not only this campaign, but in general, the effort of linking local governments will bring professionally. I think that what is very clear is that what is necessary is first strengthening the vertical links between the local governments with the national governments and national associations of local governments. That's one thing. It's very clear of the learning process that we have had in supporting local governments, not only supporting local, but also bridging the national efforts with the local efforts, also supporting the horizontal links among the local partners to ensure sustainability, the cooperation, the city-to-city collaboration. And this is a process that allows to learn and in the process and shorten, let's say, the learning curve. So skills and professions for new professionals on these urban future thinkers, systemic thinkers, urban green mobility professionals, architects that think, design, and build urban greener solutions. And as I said, that this is the perspective is that we have to generate multi-sectoral cooperation in order to boost local governments' achievements. It is a key element for that process to support risk governance and socioeconomic development. Then risk thinkers, knowledge sharing specialists, and data gathering professionals, partnership generations, and above all, new leaders that I mentioned that can translate this technical message to our broad community. I think that the local governments is one of the biggest challenges that we have as a region, to reach so many cities and to lead them in the process of becoming resilient. That's a challenge, but this is again a key role in which you youth have an important role to play. It is your future. This is something that we are ready to cooperate. This is your turn to take the lead on this process, either in the UN, either in the civil society organizations, either leading other organizations from youth to make the change.
Thank you so much, Raul, for your comments. I would like now invite Bruna back again to the screen. Hi, Bruna. The second question I would like to address to you is a question that came from the audience, and it talks about the approach of the UN Habitat towards waste management and circular economy at community and regional levels. Could you talk a little bit about this for us?
Yes, thank you, Mariana. Well, in Brazil, we don't have many projects in this area, unfortunately, because in each country, we work kind of demand-based. So it really depends on what governments or partners are focusing on. But on a global level, we have Waste-Wise Cities initiative and campaign, which is a global platform on this matter, which is very interesting. And of course, it is one of the most important topics while dealing with sustainable urban development. We have a specific goal inside the SDG related to it, which is, if I'm not mistaken, 1161, which is focused on waste management and circular economy. Unfortunately, I won't be able to give much examples in Brazil, but I could share with you the links and all the initiatives on a global level afterwards.
Thank you, Bruna. In the academic career, we always say that no evidence is also an evidence. So when you don't have an example of a project, maybe it's because we need to create the demand for it. We need to work towards it. So thank you so much for bringing this question to us. And make everyone think about what we and what the UN could do for circular economy at the community and regional levels, not only in Brazil, but in Latin America and the Caribbean region as well. So now I would like to invite Carlo back to the screen. And Carlo, my second question to you would be more directed to professional skills. What advice would you give to a young professional who is trying to start their career in the climate sector? What advice would you give to them thinking about the private sector expectations? So what are the main opportunities and what the sustainability private sector expects from someone who is trying to start their career?
Sure, thank you, Mariana. Look, what I think is when you're talking about a set of skills to work with climate, I really think more than a career, so to say, I would call for a more an activist approach. And because, you know, for example, in my team, I have people from engineers, STEAM, from, you know, journalists, and many other careers. So what I think is we have to be passionate to work with climate, I would say. We talk about resilience all the time when we talk about climate, and I think to work with sustainability, to work with climate, we must be resilient, because it's not easy in the private sector. I'd say we sometimes we give one step forward, then two backwards, and go on. And so that's why what I think is, for example, my case, as you said, I've been working as a not only working, but why not say working? I've been working with social environmental as a social environment activist for, I don't know, now almost 30 years, since I was 15. So, you know, it's part of my life. Then that's why, for example, in the beginning, I worked in a startup, a biodiesel startup, and then I worked in so many different places, so many different subjects, always below the umbrella of sustainability. So that's why, and myself, I'm a chemist with MBA in sustainability. So, you know, so that's why I don't really believe we must have a specific career. And I do believe we must be very flexible. We must be, as I said, very resilient, because, as I said, it's not so easy to talk to the top management of companies. Sometimes it's not so easy to convince. But now is very different, because, for example, in the past, when I say past, I'm talking about 2 years ago, it was very difficult to engage CEOs in climate events. Last month, we had an event with Johan Rockström in Pavan Sukhdev. You probably know them very well. And we had 35 Brazilian CEOs, you know. And I'm not saying that they were speakers. They were there to listen. So, of course, mainly now that we have this discussion around ESG, so the ESG approach, environmental, social, and governance, it is nothing new. It is sustainability, but seen from the investor perspective. And then after, I would suggest people there to Google it, the Larry Fink letters. Larry Fink is the CEO of the BlackRock. BlackRock is the largest asset manager in the world. They have, for example, 5 Brazilian GDPs in asset under management, 5 GDPs. And then every year, this guy writes a letter to the market, to the CEOs of the company he invests, and then investing. And then this year, the letter, and again, it is not an investor, a niche investor. It is the largest one. And this year, the letter was around a major structural change in the finance sector, and it is 100% on climate change. And once the finance sector do their math, it's done. It's done. There is no way back. So that's why the private sector is now almost 100% in. What I mean, they are in, I mean, in the past, and again, 1-2 years ago, it was very difficult for them to listen to climate change, but now it's very easy. It's very easy. So, but again, coming back to our question, I think we just I put it in a very easy way, and I'm not being simplistic, but I really believe that we must, you must be an activist. Really believe in it.
Carlo, thank you so much. And you advanced my third question to you, so thank you for that. Will you summarize my third question that would be about tips for young professionals who wants to engage in international organizations? So with that, I'm going to say good night to you and goodbye, and thank you for your participation. And invite Raul back so he can give some hints and some tips for international young professionals who wants to work in international organizations. And Raul, we don't have much time, unfortunately, so please, some brief comments. And I'm also saying my goodbye and my thank you to you right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariana. With pleasure. I think that's many of the opportunities to engage the UN you mentioned already. The Young Professionals Program, the UNBs is something that is also an opportunity for young professionals that have developed certain experience. Is UNB or volunteers? We do not have to misunderstand the word volunteer by someone that is just starting in the career, but someone actually that can provide some professional knowledge on a voluntary basis or under the voluntarism approach. It receives a payment. It's what they call subsistence allowance that allows actually to manage themselves in a country. And it's a very interesting entry point for a professional that wants to link to the UN. There are also opportunities on the consulting work. I think that working as a consultant, I would say, based also on my own experience, is also an entry point to make yourself known in the work of the UN, also to become aware of the modality of work of the UN. And there are a number of opportunities for consultancy open, as you mentioned well, Mariana, in Inspira. All the UN agencies belonging to the UN Secretariat have to publicize their opportunities of consultancy there, and there are multiple options of consultancy from 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, different options. And obviously you have to have certain profile where you can show you can deliver that. So my advice is build your career step by step. You do not necessarily have to link to the UN in the first step. I think it's very difficult to do it in the first as a first job opportunity. Actually, the UN is going to ask you for certain experience. It doesn't have to be a large experience, but also something that gives you the material to say, I can contribute, I can deliver in a specific area. And also internships, that's one that is not paid, but also an opportunity for the ones that are ending their career, ending their master's degree, and wants to see how a UN office works from the inside. And I think, at least from the perspective of our regional office, whenever an intern comes, we are not going to make the intern to do manual jobs. We actually put the intern into the job at the same level as a program officer or other doing their job, in the sense that the same type of responsibilities, because the process there, the richness that what they're getting is learning. So that's what we try to provide, a process of actual real learning on the field, and then use that as an experience in the future also for joining the UN or other organizations. So that's all from my side, Mariana, and thanks again for your invitation.
Thank you, Raul. And with that, I say my goodbye to you as well, and my big thank you. And I would like to invite Bruna to her final remarks, and also to give some tips for young professionals who wants to work at international organizations.
Thank you, Mariana. Well, some of the colleagues already mentioned most of the types of contract you can get in the UN, but I would like to bring back your comment on inclusivity, and that definitely is an issue in the UN system. Not only because many of the internships and UN and volunteering opportunities are unpaid, but also because of the requirements of vacancies. So definitely something that there are some initiatives for paying some agencies, if I'm not mistaken, UN Women or other agencies are starting a process to make internship paid, and also some affirmative actions related to race and gender in some other areas. They're imminent, not very systematic, but definitely it is an issue, so I'd like to bring it back. And just to summarize a little bit of all of you about what all of you have commented. So you have UNV, and not necessarily they are unpaid, how Raul mentioned. You have volunteering opportunities that are actually unpaid, and you have internships that are, I think, very interesting because you have this this experience more in depth, just like you would be in staff working, but they are most of them unpaid as well. And in the consultant area, it's important to comment as well that you not only have these more technical roles like delivering products. Most of the consultancies you see online, you have to deliver products within a short period. But you also have consultancy, for example, like mine. I'm not an actual staff, and so my consultancy is more like a management vacancy opportunity. And you can, in this kind of work, you can get more renewed contracts, for example, or opportunities in a sequence. And the YPP that you mentioned, they are more related to actual staff career. It's a very competitive process, but if you get into YPP, you are going through a more professional staff pathway. And just to bring some resources and platforms, you mentioned Inspira, which is the main one, but you also have, I would say, in Brazil, that it's very important to be looking at UN agencies' social media pages, because sometimes they are published in their websites, and not all of the opportunities are in Inspira. Sometimes they are both in Inspira and websites, but there are cases that you only will see in specific pages. And UN Brazil also makes this this work of gathering all of the opportunities in their pages. I think it's ONU Brasil Vagas. You can see all the opportunities available in their pages as well. They gather all these opportunities, being in Inspira or not. And just to conclude, I would also like to bring something that Carlo mentioned, that you don't need to build a career, you need to be an activist, and that's definitely connects with what I think for a career. I think that you really not only have to love, but also you need to really believe in the area you were focusing on. So something that really helps while looking at jobs at the UN or other international organizations is to define an area of action. So if you define, like, I don't know, gender or urban sustainable development or disaster risk management, it's easier to develop your work and studies in this area, and also to be looking at the vacancies in this area and what are the requirements they request. So you can start building up a curriculum to one day apply and be and have all the requirements they request. But yeah, I think that's a general overview of tips I would have, and resources, general tips and types of contracts. But I would be happy also to comment more on another opportunity. Thank you very much, Mariana. I'm very happy to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruna. You were right on the spot of the main tips that I would give myself. So thank you for that. And we have to end this panel. Unfortunately, it was amazing and was really inspired to hear to all of you, but we have an intense agenda for these 24 hours of the Day of the Climate Professional. So I would like to thank you. Thank you, Bruna. Thank you, Raul. And thank you, Carlo. And also thank you, the youth climate leaders, for organizing, for convening this event, and for making it happen. I think it's amazing to have people from different agendas and also from different institutions together with one common goal, that is avoiding the climate crisis. It is real, but we can still do something to make it less impact on the vulnerable populations that are suffering the most right now. So with that, I say thank you and goodbye to all of you. And thank you to Youth Climate Leaders for organizing this event. And please, if you want to keep track of the Brazilian Climate Center work with governors and with the state councils for climate change, please follow us on social medias, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. The Brazilian name, the Portuguese name is Centro Brasil no Clima, and it will be a pleasure to have you all following our work as well. So thank you, Bruna. Thank you, Carlo. Thank you, Raul. Hope to meet you again soon. And let's go to the next panel. We have another panel coming right after. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mariana. Bye, Bruna. Bye, Carlo.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.